Okay, I think we should get started. So I just want to say hi to everyone and welcome to the Sustainable Yard Care. Actually, let me turn on my camera so you can see me before I start the presentation. Welcome to the Sustainable Yard Care Workshop. My name is Megan Festuca, and I am an environmental specialist with the town of North Hempstead. I work in our Department of Planning and Environmental Protection, mostly on sustainability projects. And I would also like to introduce Bonnie Klein, who is the town's horticulturist. And Bonnie and I will be jointly giving this workshop tonight. And we really want to thank everyone for taking some time out of your evening and joining us. So Bonnie, would you like to unmute and just say a quick word about what you do for the town?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So I am the horticulturist, and you'll find me at Clark Botanic Garden most of the time. I also work at all of the 52 parks throughout the town. So, come say hi whenever you're around. And hopefully you'll enjoy our presentation this evening.
Thank you, Bonnie. Are you having any trouble hearing me?
No, sound good.
Someone said that the sound was low. I can't really increase it anymore. So I don't know if it's something on their end that's an issue, but I can't.
Sound fine. They might have to just hit it on their computer. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so before we start, I just want to remind you that everyone's muted. And if you have any questions for us during the presentation, feel free to type them into the chat box at any time. And we're going to pause at a couple of different intervals to answer them. If you don't know how to get to the chat, it's either at the bottom of your screen, hover your mouse, or at the top of your screen, you'll get that menu bar. And then there's the chat that says chat. You click on it and you type in your questions. And as you heard in the beginning, we are recording this workshop so that anyone can watch it again if they missed something, or if someone missed it altogether and wants to watch it at a later date. It's going to be posted on the sustainability page eventually. And I'll give you links for everything at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's begin. So goals of sustainable yard care. There are many. For us, we want to reduce and eliminate inputs like water, chemicals, and maintenance practices. We want to provide benefits for us. We also want to provide benefits for wildlife by creating a habitable area for them as well. And we want to promote ecosystem services. And we'll be discussing how we can accomplish a bunch of these during the presentation. So one way we can conserve our natural resources is to protect Long Island's water. If you don't know, Long Island gets all of its potable, including drinking water, from groundwater, from underground aquifers. And we often overpump this water during the summer months for irrigation, which puts a strain on the aquifer and also pulls pollutants deeper and deeper into the aquifer, thereby having to pump water from deeper layers to get clean water. So you can see in this picture, I hope everyone can see my little pointer. You can see that this, little town, everything is sitting on top of these aquifers. So it's important that we are mindful of what we're putting into the ground. We also need to look at pollution of our surface water as well. So any water coming off of our roofs, streets, lawns can transport things like pesticides, fertilizers, oil, and other pollutants into the storm drains and right into our local bays and estuaries. And also pollutants can go right into the ground and into the aquifers as well. And currently, many of our local bays and harbors are already plagued by nitrogen pollution coming in part from fertilizers. This causes algal blooms, eventually can cause dead zones and fish kills from this as well. So another goal is to provide and conserve wildlife. Much of the original habitat for wildlife has been lost to development, and most vegetated areas we have now don't support native wildlife. For example, large lawn grass areas are pretty much a desert for wildlife. They don't provide many benefits. And our use of chemicals like insecticides hurt pollinator populations, as well as other beneficial insects. And really only less than 2% of insects are considered pests. So, when you're using the insecticides on the pests, you're also harming beneficial insects as well. And when you use insecticides and you're killing these insects, that's also hurting the food chain, because insects are food for most birds and other wildlife, like the garter snake pictured here. Herbicides may also cause negative effects for insects and other wildlife, as well as kill plants like host plants for butterflies, like the monarch butterfly and milkweed. So human benefits, might as well benefit ourselves while we're taking care of our yards. Taking care of your yard sustainably can help us to achieve a beautiful yard while we work with nature instead of working against it. We can reduce our own costs and maintenance, and we can create green spaces on our properties to enjoy, where we can be outside in nature. And being in nature has been shown to improve human health and well-being as well. So having a sustainable landscape starts with the soil. It's important that we create a healthy soil ecosystem that humans and wildlife will depend on. And if we have these healthy soils, they will be able to absorb rainfall and mitigate flooding, remove pollutants from stormwater, store water for plants, wildlife, and people, provide habitat for plants and animals, and store carbon dioxide to help mitigate climate change. So composting is one way we can help improve our soil. It's the breakdown of organic materials by decomposers, by these organisms like bacteria and fungi and many others, as you can see in this decomposer food chain, to create a nutrient-rich soil amendment that we can use in our gardens and yards. It has many benefits using compost by providing nutrients for plants, attracting earthworms and beneficial insects, reducing waste that might end up in landfills and combustion facilities, reducing and eliminating the need for fertilizers, and improving soil texture and regulating the pH of soil, thereby improving the ability of plants to take in nutrients. So there are many types of compost systems. There are bins that are enclosed systems and can be used to save space. So that might be something we want to have in our homes if we have a small yard. Tumblers like this one. This is the one that the town sells for a reduced fee of $50, and I'll talk more about that later. It consists of a cylindrical drum that spins on a base so that it's easy to turn and mix the contents inside. And like I said, it can save space and keep waste in a neat area with a lid. So it'll keep out some large animals like rodents and things like that. And then there's also something like this, like a plastic or metal bin that people can actually make themselves by drilling holes in a garbage pail or in sides and the bottom and of the lid as well. So there are plenty of different types of bins that you can make or purchase. There's also piles, which will handle larger volumes of waste, and temperatures will get hotter than in the small bins, so you can break down materials faster. However, they may be harder to turn. So if you do have a pile or want to create one in your yard, something helpful is called a compost crank, this little tool I'm circling here. Basically, you stick it straight into the pile and then you twist it and then pull it out. I actually have one for mine at home to mix the compost, and it's really, really helpful. So you don't have to use a pitchfork or a shovel to try to turn it all the time. There's many types and versions of different compost piles and bins and crates like this. One really good resource is the New York City Master Composter Manual. You could just search for it online and I'm sure it will come up, but I also have a link to it on the town's website that talks about our rain barrel and composter sales. So compost, when you're creating it, it needs a balance of carbon and nitrogen-rich materials. Carbon-rich materials are known as browns, and you can see in this diagram, some of the various carbon-rich materials would be dried leaves, nutshells, sawdust, eggshells, corn cobs, newspaper, dried grass clippings, and dried garden trimmings. And then there's greens, which are these nitrogen-rich materials over here. And these would be things like your fruits and vegetable scraps, probably things we have more of because we're, always putting them in from our house, fruit peels, coffee and tea, fresh garden trimmings, fresh grass cuttings. So a good rule of thumb is to add 2 parts browns material, so 2 parts of the dried materials like these to every 1 part green. So if you are cutting up your vegetables to make something for dinner, you have a bucket of them you're going to put in your compost bin or pile. You want to take 2 parts, so 2 buckets full of the browns. So maybe if you have some dried leaves, and put those and mix them together. So if you do add too many greens, which can definitely happen because usually we have more of that than browns on hand, there's going to be too much nitrogen, which makes ammonia. Compost could smell bad and become slimy. So you definitely want to add more browns to counteract this. And then sometimes if you have too many browns, maybe it's fall, you got all the leaves on the ground and you throw in there. The organisms that are decomposing will slow down and temperatures may be too low. So decomposition will happen slowly. So we want to see if you can get some more greens in there to counteract that. You don't want to add meat, fish, or dairy. This can cause insects and animals to be attracted to it and smell, especially in small piles or bin. They won't really break down. They probably will break down in like an industrial composting facility, which we don't have in our homes usually. Colored paper you don't want to put in unless you know it's like soy ink, because the ink could be toxic. Pet waste, unless you have these pets. These are good things to put in your compost, but you don't want to put in like cat or dog waste because they can have pathogens in it. And then weeds, you don't want to put weeds in because weeds can still go to seed in your compost, and then you'll spread weed seeds all around your garden. So one thing to do if you're just starting your compost bin or pile is to take a scoop of the soil from your yard and add it to your compost. And this will add microbes that are already in your soil, and it helps to get the process of composting started. Another thing you should do is always, especially if you want fast composting, is break up the materials as much as you can before adding them. This increases their surface area and makes them more available to be broken down by the decomposers. You also want to make sure that you're adding oxygen somehow. The decomposers need this to break down everything that's in there by mixing or turning the compost, or even by adding bulking agents like wood chips or pine cones and corn cobs that can, add some space in there to create oxygen. So it can take anywhere from a few weeks to a year or more to produce compost, depending on many factors like how small your materials are, what type of materials are being used. Like if you put a whole corn cob in there, that's probably going to take a long time to break down. How often you're turning it is another factor, the temperature and the moisture content. And you can use compost pretty much anywhere you want in your soil, garden plants. I can use it to top dress lawns on exposed soil as well, under shrubs and things like that. Okay, so that is the intro to sustainable yard care. I'm going to pause for questions. It looks like we have some in the chat. Let's see. Someone wants to know finding out about mapping sewer pipes, electrical or gas lines, and ground wells under before you decide what to do with the yard. I think you probably mean like calling 811, I think it is, and they will come, and you call them, you come and they'll mark out any kind of pipes before you dig. So that's a great question. I'm assuming you're on Long Island. See. So you have a compost tumbler, but the material never breaks down at the same time. So one way you can separate the material, you can just literally take it out with your hands or a shovel. I do that with mine. It's true. A lot of stuff doesn't break down at the same time, especially if you keep adding things. So things that you added previously are going to take longer, are going to have broken down already. And then the things that you added more recently aren't going to have broken down. So I'll do that. I'll kind of just take them with my hands. There's also, you can get like a sieve, and you can actually put the materials in there and sieve out the stuff that's already done and separate it from the things that are not, the bigger pieces that are not finished yet. Someone said, I don't live in North Hempstead. Can I still purchase a bin? Unfortunately not. That's for residents only, but I'll talk more about that later. Newspaper, can you put in newspaper? Yeah, if the newspaper uses soy ink, that's fine to put in the compost. Any suggestions for indoor composting for people who don't want to use worms? I've heard of something that people use. I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if Bonnie knows. It's like bokashi or something, composting that people do indoors. The only thing I've seen is systems that are quite expensive, so you'd probably have to do some research about that. I don't know if there's any way you can just do it yourself. I feel like you need some kind of system that will do it for you. Bonnie, did you have any thoughts about that?
No, I've only used worm composting indoors.
Yeah. Someone asked, I have a hard time getting eggshells to break down in the compost. They're definitely okay to put in the compost. They're great. I used to have my boss, she was, I'm not gonna say she was crazy, but she was very into composting. So she would like grind up her eggshells first. So if you want, you can, if you really, want them to break down really fast, you could put them in a food processor and grind them up and then put them in the compost, or just even crush them up some other way so that they'll break down a little bit faster than that. But yeah, I put whole eggshells in there. It might take a little bit of time for them to break down, but they will eventually.
Yeah, I've used the food processor and grinded up a bunch of things.
See, I'm too lazy. I won't do that, but it will work. They'll break down a lot faster if you do that. How do you add oxygen into the compost? So oxygen is going to be put in the compost by you turning it. So if you have a bin, you want to turn it all the time. The bin, at least the one we sell, and most likely all the other ones that are out there, is going to have holes in the side. So as you're turning it, oxygen is going to get incorporated into the compost. Like I said, you can also use something like a bulking agent, they call it, by putting in like bigger materials, like a big corn cob or a big pine cone or something like that. And it just allows space around the materials. So it allows pockets where oxygen can go into the compost that's in there. My bin attracted a lot of flies, and it's not in the sun. A lot of trees in my yard. What to do? You can still compost in the shade. It'll probably be a little bit slower. Yeah, my bin sometimes has flies. You probably have a lot of green materials in there with a lot of nitrogen, so it's probably attracting them. So I would try to add more brown. See if you can even put like a layer of straw or leaves over it, and then usually that stops them from coming in. Let's see. Someone said they're told that microwaving eggshells makes them more brittle, so they break down easier. I never heard that. That's interesting. I don't want to say that that's true or not, but you could give it a shot and see if it helps. How far away from the house should bins be placed? I think it's preference. If you know that you're not going to walk really far away from your house to put things in it, and then I would keep it close to your house. But if it's, it's easier to take the compost out near the garden, then I would put it near your garden. So I don't think it's going to affect, how the compost is made. It's more of just personal preference. I probably would mix mine more if it was closer to my house. So if you're like me, then I would put it closer to the house. Oh, so someone said that rats were bringing eggshells into his yard. So that it's probably good to crush them. That's a good idea. I never heard that before, but it definitely seems possible that they would do that. So yeah, it's another reason to crush them before putting them in. Do we put the bin in a sunny place or shady? Sunny is definitely better because the bin will heat up better and help to break things down faster. If you don't have that, like someone was saying they had a lot of trees, put it in the sunniest place that you can, just so you get that heat. But yeah, it's better if you can put it in a sunny area than a shady area. All right, that's all the ones I have over here. Let's see, I see how moist should the compost be? Do I need to put compost near a water source? If you have a bin, you're not going to get as much water in it. I have like an open pile, so kind of it gets water and moisture from rain. So you probably, if it really shouldn't be like dripping wet, but it shouldn't be really dry either. So if you think that it looks, a lot of times also the greens will add moisture to it as well. But if you do feel like it's really dry and it's like really very crumbly, then I would definitely add some water to it. You don't have to have it near a water source. If that makes it easier for you to add water to it, then I would do that. Oh, thank you, Paul. And he's saying that bokashi is a fermenting pre-compost process, and they do it at the Dodge Homestead in Port Washington. So maybe at the end, if anyone has more questions about that, they can ask Paul. All right, that's all the questions I see for now. So feel free to, if there's something from the beginning that you have any more questions about, to keep adding them. And now I am going to hand it over to Bonnie to talk about if you do want to have a lawn. And I will talk about reasons to not have a lawn later, but there are reasons to have a lawn if you have kids playing or sporting events, and we want to be able to take care of it in a sustainable way. So Bonnie is going to talk about that now.
Hello, everybody. Just to begin the lawn care, there are a healthy lawn can provide some benefits. I love lawns. I've had them for years, and I do recommend in many cases to have lawns. And a lot of us on Long Island do have lawns. I think it's important to have a little bit of both. But just so you guys know that a healthy lawn can prevent erosion. It can improve flood control. It can help break down any organic chemicals. It can help reduce noise, produces wildlife habitat, and it helps to create a cooling effect during the summer. So there are benefits to lawn. So just wanted to let you guys know that before we begin. Okay, next. All right, so how grass grows. I just feel it's important for us to know a little bit about the biology of grass, because if we understand that, then we know how to create a more healthier lawn. So most of our grasses on Long Island are cool season grasses, and they grow best in the spring, as we'll see them starting to green up soon. And then in the summertime, if you look at this chart, the grass starts to, we call it crapping out, starts to just like sort of go dormant in the summertime. And then in the fall, it starts to pick up again. And that's just because the grasses that we grow here do better in cooler seasons. So for example, the grasses that are cool season grasses are Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, and all the fine and tall fescues. We're not going to talk too much about the zoysias and the warm season grasses in this presentation. We can grow them here on Long Island, and many people do, but that's just another lecture. So we might touch on it just a little bit. Next. Okay, so fertilizing healthy lawns in the spring, which many people do, is not the best suggestion, because what it does is it increases your top growth at the expense of the root growth, meaning that we want the roots to take hold and to be stronger. And the fertilizer that you use in early spring pushes the top growth, and the roots don't get the benefit of that fertilizer. So a lush growth encouraged by spring fertilization makes the grass more susceptible to a lot of insects and diseases. So too early in the spring is not a good idea to fertilize. So if you look at this chart, it shows you late winter or early spring. It's okay to have a shorter lawn, and you want a nice long root system. You want the roots to go deep into the profile so that it's cool, they're cool, and it can withstand the rest of the season. In late summer, early spring, when you start to mow a bit, you lose some of the roots. when you're mowing. So that's where you just don't want to fertilize too early. This is when you'd want to fertilize a little bit later in the spring. And then late summer, late fall, you have a nice deep root system going into the winter when it starts to go dormant. Next. All right, so spring coming up now is the best time to seed and fertilize only your bare spots that are caused by winter damage. Most of the time, most homeowners, they start to reseed big sections of lawns in the spring, and that's not the best time to do it. But the spring is a good time when you see all these spots that, let's say, died through the winter. This is the time that you want to do your bare spots. So this little chart here just tells you what to do. You see the spot, it's died out, so it's a bare spot. You want to loosen up all that dead grass, and then you want to choose a seed. We're going to go through how to do that. And then you want to seed, you scatter it, and then you keep it moist. So number 4, it's 1 part seed to 3 parts soil that you're going to put down on that bare spot. Okay, next. So what seed should I buy? So that's always difficult because when you go into the stores, you'll see all different types of grass seed. And it's important to look at the label to see what exactly you're purchasing. And it all depends upon your site. So right here on the top, you'll see sunny, medium to high maintenance lawn. So high maintenance means that you have a lot of inputs that you might have to put into that, meaning a little bit more fertilizer. And that's usually your Kentucky bluegrass. A lot of us love the look of a Kentucky bluegrass. The color is beautiful. But if you're going to do that, then you're going to need more fertilizer. But this is the mix for that sunny area, and it is a medium to high maintenance. You'd have 65% Kentucky blue, 15% perennial rye, 20% fine fescue, and this is how you would seed it, 3 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet. We'll leave this screen up a little bit longer, so if you guys are taking notes on it. These mixes, you don't want to only go with one type of grass, because if you get diseases or insects, then you need to take your whole lawn out. When you mix it up and you have some bluegrass, some ryegrass, some fescues, the insects and diseases are usually host specific, and they'll just go after one type and not the other. So you'll still have somewhat of a lawn that you can repair in the fall. The second one here, we have a sunny but a low maintenance lawn. So you don't do much to the lawn. You don't want to put a lot of inputs into it. And that would be your fine fescues and your perennial ryegrass. You'll throw in a little Kentucky blue. This all comes in the bag. When you look at the back of the bags of the grass seed, that's what you're going to look for. It doesn't have to be the exact percentage, but if you can get it close, these are the best blends. Or you can use a completely 100% tall fescue blend. And then in a shaded area, you'd want to use a fine fescue. Fine fescue is for shaded areas. That you can't step on it too much. It's not like for a field where you can play soccer on fine fescue. Won't hold up to that, but it will fill in and it'll look real nice in a shaded area. Next. Okay, a little bit about the fertilizer bags that you're putting down. So all fertilizer bags are labeled with 3 numbers. And as you look at this bag on the screen, you'll have your nitrogen, potassium, and your phosphorus. Well, your nitrogen, phosphorus, and your potassium, sorry, NPK. And that's all on here. That's a percentage. So in this bag of fertilizer, it's 21% nitrogen in this 50-pound bag. You have 3% of this entire bag of 50 pounds is your phosphorus and 20% is your potassium. So always refer to the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or NPK to know how much you're putting on. These numbers all represent the percentages of each element presented in 1 pound of product in that bag. So there's 21 in 50 pounds, 21% in 50 pounds. Okay, so, and then over here, let's see, I'm in the way. Hold on a sec. Okay. So here, nitrogen is for plant growth, just so you know what this means. Phosphorus is important for the establishment of the grass, and the potassium will increase the stress tolerance. Next. So fertilizing. So on a healthy, well-established lawn, there's so many different types of lawns. You can have a lawn that's not so healthy and it won't react the same way. So if you're fertilizing on a healthy, well-established lawn, looks fine, your lawn looks okay, but you want to keep it that way. The recommendation for fertilizing home lawns on Long Island is 1 pound of nitrogen, not 1 pound of product, to be spread over 1,000 square feet of each fertilization. And we recommend that you fertilize 1 application around Memorial Day, and that should bring you through the summer, and 1 application Labor Day. And just to remember, Nassau County, you cannot fertilize between November 15th and April 1st. That's a law. And in Suffolk County, you cannot fertilize between November 1st and April 1st. That's because of the nitrogen that they're finding in our water. Next. Soil test. Soil test is very important. This is one of the first things that I do when I go onto a site, and I want to make sure you know what's going on in the soil. So this soil test that you can purchase through Cornell. There's others at other nurseries. If you go into a nursery, you'll find other types. I've been using this one for years. It monitors the plant nutrient levels. Well, you want to first know your pH level. You can do a full nutrient analysis, which is plant nutrient levels, but you first want to check your pH level. And when you check your pH level, what that means is if the level is a little too acidic or a little too alkaline, and it's not perfect for grasses, which grasses like it at about 6.5 to 6.8. And if it's not at those levels, the grass is never going to pull up all the fertilizer that you're putting down, and that will just run off. So you want to make sure that your soil is at the right level that the grass will pull up that fertilizer. Otherwise, you're wasting your money, and all that nitrogen and NPK is going right into our water. So that's just an important thing to do during a soil test, and it's so easy to do. And also, do not identify or measure insect population diseases, drainage issues, pesticides, or other chemical levels. So you know that's okay. Next, mowing. So just some tips on mowing. A dull mower blade, something so simple as just sharpening your mower blade, will increase your water loss, will increase your fuel use, and will increase all your opportunities for pests. So if you start off the season and you sharpen your blades, you can help with all those 3 items right away. So just check your mower blade through a little bit more often throughout the season, so that you can make better opportunities for with your mower. Next. Okay, mowing heights and frequency. A lot of people don't know where to put their mower, what level to put your mower. And you can have a much healthier lawn if you know where to put the level of your lawn. So the best thing you can do is that you can do for your turf is your lawn, is to maintain a 3-inch mowing height. That's the best thing you can do. It's not so easy to do that, but that's the best thing you can do, because if you look here on this chart, as mowing heights decrease, the roots decrease as well. And if you have a short root system, then your plant will dry out faster. Plant meaning turf, it'll dry out, and you'll see it on the top. Your lawn will just turn brown. So mowing frequency, when it hits the 3 inches, you take off 1 inch. So you want to avoid removing more than 1/3 of your grass blade length at any one mowing. If you wanted to let it go, a little taller, but you only want to remove 1/3. So if you have 3 inches, remove 1 inch to 2 inches, then it grows back to the 3 inches, and then you remove it back to the 2 inches. And that will keep a healthy root system, and that's the goal. If the root systems are happy, then the top is happy. Next. Now, watering your lawns. This is one of the biggest problem, especially on Long Island. there was laws, I guess, in most towns and villages that you are able to monitor. I don't know if this still holds true to for most of you. You're able to water on if you're an odd home number on an odd day, even home number an even day. So that's what they're telling you when you're allowed to water, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should only water on odds and even days. I mean, you're allowed to water then, but sometimes you're doing, it's too shallow of a watering. So you want to do maybe a more deeper watering. So what this is saying is don't water shallow and frequently on established turf. Every other day for 15 to 45 minutes is very shallow. You want a deep, more infrequent watering. So you know the days you're allowed to water, let's say on an odd day, but you don't have to do it every other day. You can skip the middle day and water longer on some days. Because that, when you're doing it every other day and not often, it creates a shallow profile for your soil moisture and it dries everything out. And and as it says right here, it stimulates your weed seeds. It promotes diseases and fungus and insects, grub problems, and it causes surface crusting, moss and algae buildup in many of the shaded areas. So in this picture, you see when you're watering deep and infrequent compared to when you're watering deep and too much, you're losing roots. And also when you're watering shallow and frequent, you see the roots stay at the top. So what you want to do is water deep and infrequent. An example of that would be maybe 3 times a week on the days that you're allowed, according to your village or town, but water longer, water for an hour. And you'll get the same amount of water, but it'll benefit the lawn a little bit more. Next. So here's your best practices for watering your lawn. It's 1 to 1.5 inches of water per week for an established turf. You can test it. You can use a rain gauge, or you can use a can and turn your system on. And when that can is full, like let's say a tuna fish can or cat food can, that's about 1.5 inches. And when that fills, then you'll know how long it takes your system to put out that much water. So if it takes your system 2 hours to put out 1.5 inches, then you only have to water 2 times a week for an hour each. If it takes 3 hours to put out 1.5 inches of water, then you can water 3 times a week for an hour. So deep and infrequent, very important. You'll see a huge difference. And often most of the needed water will be supplied by rain. So if you have a rain gauge as well, then you'll know naturally what came down and then how often you have to water. So just don't be afraid of your system, your irrigation system, and learn how to use it. Next. Weeds. So weeds. A weed is a plant growing in the wrong place. So it could be a different plant for different people, what a weed is. So the life cycle of the weed can determine how you might or might not want to control the weed. So knowing the life cycle, and there's easy ways to learn that, you'll be able to know how you can control it. Next. So here's some just preventative weed practices. And we're you want to try these options before we're going to resort to any types of herbicides or pesticides. An herbicide is a pesticide, whether it be organic or whether it be synthetic. So there's, just to clear that up, quickly, an organic pesticide could be a vinegar-based pesticide that's labeled for the pest. It's organic, but it's still considered a pesticide. An oil-based or a safe soap, those are all still considered pesticide. Anything that's killing your weed is considered an herbicide, and an herbicide is a pesticide. So try these options before resorting to any type of chemical, or whether it be organic or not. You want to mow it high. That's our 3-inch rule. You want to reduce compaction. Sometimes the soils are very compacted, and you can do that by core aerating and letting oxygen in. You want to repair those bare spots in the spring. You want to use maybe some compost or fertilizer. Compost is a more natural fertilizer. You can top dress with the compost that you make in the composter on your lawns. That's a huge benefit for lawns, is putting some fine compost down. And then you can hand weed. Lots of times you don't have enough weeds to warrant using any type of herbicide, and you can just hand weed that area. Next. So using the weeds as indicators. So there are weeds on your lawn, but there's reasons sometimes why they're there. So if you have weeds such as crabgrass, clover, pigweed, spurge, yarrow, yellow wood sorrel, goosegrass, then your soil is probably too dry, and those weeds love it that way, and they're opportunists, so they set in. So if you have any of those weeds, then look at your soil, dig into your soil, see what's going on. You might just have to water a little bit more. And then if you have nut sedge, which that's been a big problem lately, creeping bentgrass, lots of times people have creeping bentgrass in their lawns, and they right away think it's a fungus, and they'll use an herbicide on it, but it's not. It's the nature of that bentgrass. That's what it does. It sort of is brown, and then the tips are just green, so it looks like a dead grass, but it's not. Buttercups, docks, all of these types of weeds, then your soil is probably too wet, or you have poor drainage, a lot of compaction and poor drainage. So if you correct your soil problems, then you won't have to use any pesticides. So identify the weed first. That's the first key. And IPM, Integrated Pest Management, is first to know what you're dealing with before you just buy any type of an herbicide or pesticide thinking you're correcting the problem. Next. And then leaves. So, we get a lot of leaves in the fall. You can use your mower to shred those leaves, and most mowers now have that on it, where it's a mulcher, it's a mulch mower, and then just leave it on the lawn, just mulch them. If you do it often and don't wait 2 weeks every time to do it, you can mow those leaves, and then it breaks it down, and it's nice and small, and it just drops into the profile, and you have nice leaf mulch, which is great for your lawn. It's all nitrogen. Also good mulch in the garden beds. You can use the leaves for a mulch, or just to for the winter protection of a lot of your garden beds, because it does, again, here provide nutrients, and it also helps to prevent weeds in those beds. Next. So weed control. Mulching is great for weed control, as we just said. Mechanical removal, you can use a hoe, a rototiller, or a cultivator, or mowing for weed control. Physical removing, hand pulling, as we spoke about. We do a lot of that at Clark Botanic Garden. Using plant diversity, different types of plants, different types of the grasses in the lawns can help to prevent weeds. And you use chemical control as your last resort. And again, if you're going to use any chemical control, you make sure you follow all the directions carefully. You choose the lowest toxicity, be the most selective, the lowest residue, organic, for example, corn gluten meal. And you can only, as a homeowner, put anything down on your property. Legally, you have to have a license to do it on your neighbors. So you can't help your neighbor out by putting anything down on their property. The owner of the property is the only one that's allowed to do it, or a licensed pesticide applicator. Next. A little bit about insects and diseases. So many observed landscape problems are not caused by insects or diseases. They set in after the fact. It's usually stressed out. Your lawn's all stressed out because too wet, too dry, many different reasons, and the insects can sense this and then they set in. So if you eliminate all these other factors first and have a healthier lawn, the insects won't be there. Lots of times, many homeowners blame the insects right away and they just jump to go get a pesticide. But it's really the health of the lawn. If the lawn is healthy, the insects aren't coming. So use cultural practices, as we spoke about, to try to get rid of the insects and diseases first. And pesticide is the last resort. Next. Most diseases in turf are caused by fungus. That's the highest amount percentages of diseases in turf is a fungus, if you do have a disease. There are 25 fungi that can damage turf. Disease only becomes noticeable when 3 to 5% of the turf is affected. The fungus attacks turf plants because they're in a monoculture, all in one. If you have a whole all bluegrass lawn, that's when a disease will attack more. And usually you'll see these diseases after the fact. So you see it, it's already damaged. That disease is gone. It's not there anymore. There's nothing you can do to kill anything. So it's after the fact. You have to use preventative methods in order to not have that fungus there to begin with. Next. So pesticide application or any type, even seeding for that matter, or fertilizing, you don't want to have one of these spreaders that just spread it everywhere and goes on your sidewalk, goes down in the drain. You want to have more of a drop spreader. So improper spreader use, or the kind of spreader that just goes all over the place, is not good. Timing of application, you want to make sure it's not a windy day, maybe too sunny, too hot. You want the timing of your application to be good. You want to make sure you water it in. You follow the directions. If it says to water things in, you want to watch that weather, know your soil type, and know the material, how soluble it is. Next. Okay, are there any questions?
I do see some questions. Let me see. Okay, so someone says they have a small Zoysia lawn. I think I pronounced that correctly, which grows spring through fall. I have not fertilized or watered the grass for 5 or so years and it remains strong and healthy. That's great.
That's great. Lots of times when you mow and leave your clippings, that acts as a fertilizer, and it takes about that many years, 3-4 years, before you don't have to have any other inputs. If you continue to just mulch your grass clippings into the lawn, it uses that as fertilizer. That's great.
Someone also has some good comments about Zoysia lawns. They say that their grandchildren play soccer on it and it still remains strong, and they have not reseeded it for 5 or more years.
Yes, I've had a lot of experience with Zoysia. There's good and bad, just like any other turf lawn. They also get sometimes diseases and sometimes they don't. If you have a healthy lawn and it's in the right spot, just like any other plant, right plant in the right place, that's fantastic. There's sometimes people like that look and sometimes people don't. So it's just a matter of taste.
Someone wants to know, for high traffic, low sun areas, which grass seeds are good, or any low ground cover?
For a high traffic area, the fescues are better. They usually use the creeping ryegrass just to start it off so weeds don't come in. Ryegrass grows really quickly, fills in, and then the fescues take over. That's the best really for high traffic, is I would say the fescues.
Thank you. Someone wants to know about recommendation for low nitrogen fertilizer. I definitely would recommend that if you're going to use fertilizer, but Bonnie, do you have specific experience using those that you can recommend?
A low nitrogen fertilizer, Well, if you don't want to use the synthetic fertilizers, they do have, we use one with Mesa, but they have organic fertilizers out there, and they're a little bit lower than the other regular turf fertilizers, but not much. I would add compost. I add compost, fine compost. I just make my compost. It has nitrogen in it, and it's natural. And I top dress in the spring and in the fall. And I don't add any other fertilizer to my lawn.
Great. Someone wants to know about a native lawn substitute and is similar to lawn for traffic or play. So I know I'm going to be talking about native plants that can replace lawns. I don't know if you have any specific ones that are good for high traffic areas, though.
Well, lawn meaning turf, meaning, monocots or grass. I don't know of any natives for our area. So there are they're perennial plants that you can use, that you can walk on. I don't know high traffic, but you're going to be speaking about that in a little bit.
Should I leave the leaves around my plants? The gardeners usually rake them out. Yes.
Yeah, I like to do that too. I like to leave my leaves. Sometimes we rake out the leaves, mulch mow it, and then rake it back in. So it's just smaller pieces and it breaks down. Or if that's just too much work, you can leave the leaves around your plants. It's great protection in the winter time. And then you can rake them out in the spring and make a leaf pile, compost leaf pile, and let that break down and then reuse that.
Leaves are also helpful for overwintering insects. Different pollinators, butterflies, moths will go under the leaves and use that as protection for them. So besides being helpful for you, it's helpful for them as well. So I do that in my yard and I recommend that. Someone wants to know where you can get a rototiller. I'm assuming any kind of hardware store would sell those, or garden supply store.
Oh yeah, they're sold in many places.
Online, I'm sure a lot of places have those.
Yeah.
Someone wants to know the name of the lawn. It's Zoysia. Do you know how to spell it, Bonnie? I don't want to spell it wrong.
I think it's Zoy, Zoysia, no, Zoysia, Zoysia. So it's a warm season grass, and it's brown in the winter, and then it starts to green up.
Someone said the compost seems to have weed seeds. Is it still good to put down on the lawn? I'm not sure if they mean their own compost or it's one that they bought from somewhere.
Well, if it's composted, then, and it's truly composted the right way, then the weed seeds should have died down. You shouldn't put any weeds in your compost, but you're always going to find a little bit of weeds in your compost. I've always had that experience. If you're using compost in your beds or in your lawn, either way, it's okay. If you have a nice healthy lawn, then it'll shade out the weeds and they won't take over.
Someone said their leaves tend to kill the ground cover. Did they leave too much leaves down? I'm not sure what ground cover they're talking about, but
yeah, if it's right on top of the crown of the plant, I wouldn't put it like right on top of the crown of a perennial plant. It can be around it, but not like covering the top of the crown. If it's thick leaves, it depends what trees you're talking about. Big oak leaves, or if you have a lot of it, then it's going to keep the moisture on it. So you don't want to have like 4 or 5 inches of leaves on top of your perennial beds.
I think they said they were talking about lawn. So.
Oh, your lawn. Oh no, I wouldn't leave the leaves on top of the lawn. That's only if you're going to mulch the leaves and then rake it into the lawn and it's nice and fine, anything fine on the lawn. If you leave the leaves on the lawn, and that's not what we're talking about. You have to get the leaves off the lawn, although the lawn will die. The leaves are more for your beds. You can leave thick leaves on your beds, but and then mulch it when it's on the lawn.
Someone's asking that they brought a home last year and noticed a grub issue in the fall and want to know if they will die over the winter.
Well, so that depends if you're sure it's grubs. So first, you want to make sure that you have grubs, and grubs come to the surface. I believe in July they come to the surface, and if you have grubs, then you make a square foot and you pull up that grass. And if you have a grub problem, there'd be more than 8 grubs. That means they're chewing away at your root system. If you only have 1 grub when you do that in that area, then you don't have a grub problem. But the grubs go all the way back down into the lawn, into the soil profile, and they live way down deep in the soil. So they're not at that surface in the wintertime. They're deep down. They come up in the summertime. And as they're coming up, they're chewing on the root system.
Okay. So one more question here. Someone said that mulching mowers work great.
Yes.
Yes, we agree. Okay, I think that was all the questions for now. So I will move on to the second portion of the presentation, or second portion of my third portion of the whole presentation. So I want to talk now about conserving water. So as another goal of sustainable yard care is to lower inputs like the use of potable water. And this graphic shows that as much as 50% of the water we use for outdoor irrigation is wasted due to things like evaporation, leaks, sprinklers pointed at the wrong direction, runoff, and more. So how can we help? One way is to do rainwater harvesting, which is collecting rainwater off an impermeable surface like a roof and then using it at a later time to water your plants in your garden. It has many benefits, like reducing the demand on the existing water supply. And I already talked about how Long Island aquifers are often strained during the summer months because of this, this high water use for our landscaping needs. They help to reduce stormwater pollution by capturing that water off of these impermeable surfaces. They help you to save money on potable water, and also rainwater is said to be good for plants, better actually than tap water since it doesn't have chlorine, which can inhibit plants from taking in nutrients and reduce their growth. A rain barrel, like the one pictured, is a very common system that's used in homes. It's usually a container that's about 50 gallons, and I'll talk a little bit more about them now. There are many different types of rain barrels and different setups. People can make them themselves, they can purchase them, but all of them should have some type of screen at the top to let the water come in, but prevent mosquitoes and debris from coming in. A spigot at the bottom to drain the water, and an overflow spout or hose so that if the barrel fills up with water, it doesn't go into your house or foundation. So when you want to install a rain barrel, it's really great to place it underneath a gutter downspout. Otherwise, the water won't get in it very well. You can have an open one, just letting the rainwater come in, but you won't get as much water, and it won't be as concentrated, so you won't get a lot of water quickly. So you can see like this one is under the gutter downspout. And choose a location that's close to where you want to use the water, so it's easy to transport it. You most likely probably need to cut your gutter downspout. Usually they kind of go down to the ground, and maybe install some kind of elbow piece so that the water can flow into the screen on top of your rain barrel. Another important thing to do is to put it up higher, so on cinder blocks, bricks. Sometimes if you buy them, they come with a stand, or you could purchase a stand, so that this increases the water pressure and allows a watering can to fit underneath it. And you also want to make sure that the foundation is stable wherever you place your rain barrel, because when it's filled with water, rain barrels can be hundreds of pounds and it will be dangerous if it tips over and falls. So this is the rain barrel that the town sells. It has a flat back, and it saves space, so it can go right up against the building, and it comes with a screen and a brass spigot, and also has an overflow spout over here. It is $50, and it is for town of North Hempstead residents only, and I'm going to provide more details about how to purchase these at the end of the presentation. So the water you catch in your rain barrel should definitely not be consumed by humans or pets, and should only be used to water your lawns and gardens. We also tell everyone to use caution when using water coming from rooftops to water vegetable gardens, due to the chemicals that may leach from rooftop materials, as well as bacteria from things like bird droppings. However, you can use your judgment to decide what is best for you when you're using that water. If you do decide to use the water on edible plants, just make sure that you are watering the roots and try not to water the leaves and the part of the plant that you're going to eat, and wash everything thoroughly before eating it. So another way you can save water is by using water efficient irrigation, and you can also pair these with a rain barrel as well. Soaker hoses on the left and drip irrigation lines on the right can be hooked up to the rain barrel spigot to provide water to nearby gardens. I wouldn't use a regular hose as much with a rain barrel unless you have it up really high where you're getting a lot of water pressure, but a soaker hose works great for it. So by using soaker hoses, which as you can see from the picture have small holes throughout, or these drip irrigation, which are basically tubing that has holes that are evenly spaced, water will be directed right to the roots and won't evaporate, unlike sprinklers, which are often spraying water into the air and allowing for evaporation of water more easily. Another way you can save water is by regulating automatic sprinkler systems. I don't know how many times I drive in the morning on my way to work and I see it's raining, or it just rained yesterday and people's sprinklers are on. So automatic sprinklers should be equipped with a soil moisture sensor or a rain sensor that so that you're not watering when it's raining or when the soil has enough water already. Another thing you can get is a smart irrigation controller. So that connects to the irrigation system, and it turns the system on and off by monitoring the weather. And it can also connect to rain sensors and soil moisture sensors too. I know that the Port Washington Water District offers $150 rebates for the purchase of these smart irrigation controllers for residents. So if you live in that area, you can check that out and take advantage of that. And also, if you're going to purchase one, you should use a WaterSense labeled irrigation controller, because they will definitely help you save on water use. Also, it's important to properly maintain your sprinkler system. So make sure your sprinkler heads are directed toward plants and not toward the sidewalk. That's another thing that I always see all the time when driving. I see people watering the sidewalk more than they're watering their lawn or plants. That's definitely wasting water. Check for leaks in hoses and for broken sprinkler heads. Those can definitely waste water. And you should winterize your system by emptying it of water and turning it off for the season. As you can see from this infographic, it says a broken sprinkler head can waste 25,000 gallons of water in 6 months. That's a lot of water. So just, make sure you're checking these things out each season to prevent this water waste. And sorry, this is an irrigation controller, and this is a rain sensor. It's like the inside of a rain sensor. So Bonnie kind of talked about mulch a little bit in weed suppression, but you can also use mulch to save water because it limits evaporation and it has the added benefit of suppressing weeds. So you get a 2-for-1 deal. There's many different types of mulch you can see down here. So, you can personal preference of the look of whichever one you want. So you can see leaves are down here. We talked about that a lot. For trees, you want to use around 2 to 3 inches. Do not volcano mulch. Again, as driving to work, I'll see this a lot where whoever put the mulch on these trees, they make a big mound right up against the trunk of the tree. That will trap moisture around the roots and it leads to fungus and rot. So you want it to be more like this, where there's a space around the trunk and you see the root flare so that oxygen gets to it. And then with perennials, a 1 to 2 inch amount of mulch is good as well. And then, as we talked about before, because it suppresses weeds, it's a natural alternative to using an herbicide like a pre-emergent in the soil. So I know Bonnie likes lawn. I'm not as crazy about it. So I'm going to talk about replacing it. So a lot of times, if you're taking care of your lawn, it shouldn't be too water intensive, but a lot of times, people put their automatic sprinklers on and then they just let it go. So another way we can save water is by replacing it with these less water intensive or drought tolerant plants. Native plants are a great option for that. These plants have lived and evolved over hundreds or even thousands of years in our region and are adapted to our climate, like dry summers. They can handle drought conditions. So there are plants you'll hear that are native. So some are native to Long Island specifically, some are native to New York, and some are native to North America. So when you're looking for native plants, it's best to choose those that are closest to our region. So a North American native is better than an Asian or European native, but a New York native or a Long Island native is better for our location. And these pictures show some native ground cover. Someone was asking about that. One that is somewhat close to grasses are the sedges. I don't think they do that well in very high traffic areas, but if you're just looking to walk on it, every now and then, I wouldn't play sports on them. They're probably a good option. This is moss phlox, Phlox subulata. This is actually in front of my house and it spreads really quickly. This is that little strip next to the street, and I thought it was a great alternative to grass, and it's also beautiful. So. And then there's also wild strawberry, which is another thing that I have in my yard, and it spreads very quickly. It has pretty white flowers in the spring, good for pollinators. It also produces edible strawberries if you can get them before the animals do. So I will use myself as an example. This is my house in 2019 when I used to have a lawn in the front. I was sick of my very dry, sunny front yard and decided to replace it with all native plants. Besides my desire to attract pollinators, I also wanted to save water and I wanted to reduce maintenance since I didn't have a sprinkler system. So I was sick of going out there and putting the sprinkler on every few days. So now this is what my yard looks like every summer. And these are all native plants, and I'll talk more about different ones that you can use in your yard as well. And I also will say that with high temperatures of the summer the past few years and the lack of rain, I never had to water once in these areas. So definitely a water saver over the lawn. So I want to talk more about native plants, and there are many other benefits. You can see from this infographic, they provide many benefits for us and for wildlife, and I'll go through some of them now in more detail. So one benefit is the absorption of stormwater runoff due to their very long root systems, and these root systems will create spaces in the soil which can then take in water and help the water absorb. And you can see from the picture, a lawn grass like Kentucky bluegrass has roots that are only a few inches deep, while native plants like these native grasses, Indian grass, big blue stem, switchgrass, little blue stem, they have roots that some are going to almost 10 feet deep. So that's quite a bit larger than the tiny few inches of the Kentucky bluegrass. Another benefit is the lower amount of inputs. So you don't need to fertilize native plants. They're adapted to our local soils and the nutrients that are in these soils. Most of them don't need to be watered after they're established. So if there's a long drought, then I would consider watering them as well. But as long as you're choosing the right plant for the right conditions in your yard, you don't have to water them very often, if at all. They don't need to be mowed, so less pollution and maintenance than lawns. And most, if not all, are perennials in our area, so you don't need to plant them every year. And so they come back every year, so you don't have to worry about planting annuals or putting grass seed down, and they're just there, they come back. And they're also more resistant to native pests because they've evolved with these plants and animals, so they have a tolerance for these and are resistant to these native insects that might be trying to feed on them. They're also very beautiful. There are many plants that are just as pretty as exotic plants that we put in our yards all the time. They have vibrant seasonal color changes, including fruit, and some of it's edible to us, although some of it's only edible to wildlife. So just make sure you know that if you're purchasing something, what you can eat and what you can't. On the left, this is aromatic aster. It's a beautiful fall blooming plant, great for pollinators in the fall. And it actually blooms well into November and December, especially with climate change. It's been, this year we had one at one of our parks and it was still blooming in December, and it was, I was very shocked that it was still blooming then. This middle one is Columbine. It's beautiful, and it's a great plant for hummingbirds if you want to try to attract hummingbirds to your yard. They love the red tubular flowers. And then this is low bush blueberry on the right. I love low bush blueberry and high bush blueberry as well. They look very similar, just high bush blueberry is taller. They're a good early spring flower. They're not that showy, but they are very pretty, these white bell-shaped flowers, and they provide food for early bees that come out. They also will produce berries, so you'll have that blue color when there's berries, and then they have a beautiful red color of the leaves in the fall. So if you have something like burning bush where you want that red fall color and you don't want an invasive plant anymore, this would be a good alternative to that. These are a bunch more natives. You can see these are all photos that I took from the town's gardens that we planted with native plants. You could see purple coneflower here with some cute skipper butterflies feeding off of it. Mountain laurel are just beautiful evergreen shrubs, actually. So if you're looking for an evergreen plant, they're very nice. I have them in my yard. Red chokeberry. Garden phlox is probably a common one people already know and may have in their yards. Golden rods are great, provide really great fall yellow color in the garden as well as for wildlife. Anise hyssop is a very mint plant, so you can have a nice aroma as well as beautiful flowers that are loved by butterflies. And then blazing star is a really cool looking, interesting looking plant to have in your garden that's also loved by pollinators and especially butterflies. I always see monarchs on them. So I started talking a little bit about resources for wildlife, but as I said, native plants provide many resources for wildlife. They have nectar, pollen, seeds, leaves, fruit that feed birds, butterflies, bees, other insects, as well as mammals. And I talked about before, pollinators and other wildlife have evolved with these plants, and they provide the nutrition and resources that are needed for them. They also provide cover to wildlife to rest during bad weather and to hide from predators. They provide nesting materials and habitat for birds, insects, and mammals. And they are also specific host plants for butterflies for their larvae. So for example, monarch butterflies, larvae only eat milkweed plants. So that's their host plant. So if you want to attract monarchs to your yard, definitely plant some milkweed. This is butterfly weed in this picture. And the great thing about plants like milkweed is the flowers not only attract the monarchs for the host plant to lay their eggs there, but they're also great nectar plants for bees and other butterflies as well. So you'll get lots of pollinators on them. And another thing that these native plants will do is reduce habitat fragmentation. Much of the environment that exists now is fragmented due to human development. And if we create these areas with native habitat in our residential yards, our businesses, and public spaces like parks, I hope that we can help connect this habitat for wildlife to use. So last year, the town of North Hempstead received funding from the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District to offer town residents rebates for creating native plantings in their yard. It was a really successful program, and we spent all the money. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough money for everybody who wanted to get a rebate. But we did have 13 people create native plant gardens all throughout the town. And these are some examples. This one was created in Roslyn Heights, in Mineola, and in Port Washington. And we are hoping we will have this program again this year if it's funded. So we'll probably be releasing it in April with some modifications based on what we learned in last year's program. So if you're interested in doing something like this in your yard, please check back in April. And again, this would be for town of North Hempstead residents only. So I already started talking about pollinators. Pollinator conservation is a very important thing to me as well as to the town. So pollinators on Long Island, there are other pollinators like bats and things like that in other areas. We don't have any pollinating bats on Long Island, but we have pollinating insects plus hummingbirds that are pollinators. These insects include bees, flies, butterflies, moths, beetles, and wasps. And they play an essential role in pollinating things like flowering plants, like wildflowers, trees, garden plants, and cultivated crops. Bees are the most important pollinators because they have many hairs and other specialized structures that they actively collect the pollen on, and that this is used to feed their larvae, which means that they transport it better than other pollinators like butterflies and flies, although flies do have some hairs, so they can look like bees. So most people think of honeybees when they think of bees. Bees are not native to the United States. They were brought here from Europe, and they are basically a cultivated species. So while they are important for livestock, for our crops, we have a lot of amazing native bee species here that need our protection. And I know people think of honeybees, so they might think all bees, have this social lifestyle with a hive, but over 90% of bee species are solitary and do not have a hive. They instead nest in the ground or in cavities like wood or plant stems. In this picture, you can see this leafcutter bee. It's something that nests in cavities and will cut pieces out of leaves to line their nests. This is a furrow bee, which is a type of sweat bee, and this is something that nests in the ground. I'm sure everyone knows about bumblebees. They actually are a social bee and they have a colony nest, but it's not as large as a honeybee nest. They usually only have 50 to 100 individual bees in those nests, and they're an annual species. So the hive will die back in the fall, and then the female queens will come out, they'll hibernate, and then they'll come out in the spring and start new nests. So some native pollinator species have suffered population declines over the last few decades. I don't know if you've heard about the rusty patch bumblebee. It's now listed as an endangered species, and that used to be found in New York. And the monarch butterfly, which was recently determined by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Commission to be warranted of protection under the Endangered Species Act, but unfortunately wasn't put under the act because of the lack of resources by the commission. So it's really important that we do what we can to protect pollinators. And these are just a few pictures that I took while in the town's pollinator gardens that we created. it's just pretty cool what you can find out there. If you really look, you don't even realize these small creatures are out there in your own gardens and yards. This is actually a fly. It's called a Transverse Flower Fly. It's a bee mimic. This is a bumblebee mimic. It's a Narcissus bulb fly. These are both hover flies. They're actually really great pollinators. This is a Nessus sphinx moth, another bee mimic. They're really cool if you can see them. You won't even realize they almost look like a hummingbird, but a little bit smaller because they just hover around the flowers. So one thing I did want to just quickly mention is a lot of times bees get blamed for things that are this guy's fault. This is a yellow jacket. So these are normally what you're seeing if you're outside in a picnic or, you know, eating food outside, you see yellow jackets. A lot of people are always like, oh, there's bees, but it's usually yellow jackets. Bees will eat nectar and pollen from flowers, but yellow jackets will eat whatever they can get. And I don't want to say all bad things about wasps. Wasps actually are not bad. They are really good species to have in your garden. Many of them are pollinators as adults, and they are predators. So they will eat pest bugs and feed it to their young. So they are very beneficial to have in your gardens as well. So if you're interested in seeing more of my pollinator sightings and other wildlife sightings in the town's gardens, I have an iNaturalist page that I created, and I will share the link at the end of the presentation. So another thing we did to help conserve pollinators is the town released a pollinator pledge for anyone who manages a landscape. So you can take the pledge and commit to actions that protect pollinators. And it includes basically anyone who has property that you're managing a landscape. So residents, businesses, schools, nonprofits, places of worship, anything. Actions include reducing and eliminating pesticide use, planting native plants, managing invasive species, and participating in community science. So I encourage everyone to please take the pledge and share it widely so we can get more involved with helping pollinators in the town. And this is really for the town, but you know, if you really want to and you're not in the town, you can take the pledge too. Monarch butterfly conservation is another thing that's very important to the town. The eastern monarch butterfly population, there are actually two migratory populations, one in the mid and eastern US known as the eastern population, and one in California known as the western population. So the eastern one that is in our area has declined by more than 80% over the past 2 decades, mostly due to habitat loss and pesticide use. So the town took the mayor's Monarch Pledge in 2018. So we've committed to taking actions to help monarchs and other pollinators, like public outreach on the topic. So what we're doing right now, helping to educate the public, increasing monarch habitat in our properties, and participating in research on town-owned land. So as I've talked a little bit about that, we have multiple pollinator gardens in the town parks, and I'll show you some pictures of those in a second. And we're also contributing to research with the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project by counting the numbers of eggs and larvae and pupae on the milkweed plants at Clark Botanic Garden. And that helps researchers to collect long-term data on the monarch's distribution and abundance during the breeding season. And you can participate in this project too. So if you have milkweed in your yard or planning on planting it, or you have a local park that you can get permission to monitor at, it's a really fun project, and kids really enjoy it too. They have like a simple sheet if you want to do it with your kids. They really love, I have my niece come over, she loves seeing the monarch caterpillars, and it's just really fun to do. And it also helps with the research as well, which is great. So as I said, I wanted to share some of the native plantings we have in the town's park. So this is the big pollinator garden at Clark Botanic Garden in Albertson. We also have a rain garden there that has many native plants, and there are native plants throughout the whole property as well there. Gary Park, we've planted quite a few different gardens. This is just one of them with native plants. So come on down to Roslyn and visit, and you could see lots of native plants and ideas for your own yard. This is at Ritter's Park. We planted a couple years. We actually got funding from the Soil and Water Conservation District to plant a couple of gardens there. And this is at Tully Park. We just did this one last fall. Then a few more. This is Martin Reed Park in Newcastle. We planted 2 gardens there. Fushillo Park in Carl Place. And at the Yes We Can Community Center, we planted a few gardens there. So please come visit, look at the pollinators, get some ideas for your own yard there. So ways you can help pollinators. I've said it a million times, plant native plants on your property. You can reduce or eliminate your pesticide use. Bonnie kind of talked about this, but pesticides are the big, category, and they include herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, anything that kills any kind of pest. Definitely reduce insecticides, as these can directly kill pollinators and other beneficial insects. Allow some damage on your plants from insects if it's just cosmetic. It means that things are using your habitat, and allow the predatory insects to do the work. If the damage is too much, too severe, like it's killing the plant, as Bonnie said before, look for organic, low toxicity insecticides and use them selectively. So don't be spraying them everywhere, so it's going to kill anything that's in your plants. And also be aware that spraying for mosquitoes will kill other insects, including pollinators, and may harm birds which eat them. The best way to get rid of mosquitoes is to remove any standing water. So in bird baths, clogged gutters, buckets, fountains. And if you can't remove it, you can use mosquito dunks. They're sold online and at hardware stores. They are a selective insecticide that only kills mosquito larvae and not other animals. If you want to protect yourself, make sure you use bug spray as well. You can provide nesting areas. So if you look in this picture, these are actually bee nests. So as I said, many bees nest in hollow stems or in bare patches of ground. So providing these can be helpful, leaving a dead tree stump, leaving bare ground. So I know we talked about mulch, but if you have some space, leaving a little bare ground is helpful for nesting bees. And also leaving perennial plant stems up. So if you're going to cut them back, leave them a little bit high, cut them back to 8 to 12 inches so that you can provide some of these bees that nest in cavities with some habitat. You can reduce outdoor lighting, like artificial light, especially at night, which causes wildlife to change their normal behavior. It interferes with migratory birds, amphibians, and insects. You can get motion sensor light. You can also use yellow LED bulbs, which are supposed to be less attractive to insects. You can participate in community science, like I was talking about with the Monarch larva monitoring project, and I'll provide a link about that later. And also providing resources for pollinators also helps other wildlife as well. Like I talked about, things will live in those native plants and habitat, like birds, snakes, small mammals. They will get food from those insects. Birds will eat seeds from the native plants. So everything's all connected. All right, so the last topic, I know it's 8 o'clock, so I'll try to rush through this. I just wanted to discuss is capturing stormwater runoff. We kind of talked about that with the rain barrels and native plants, but I will just talk a little bit about rain gardens. We're actually having a class in that, so if you're interested in learning more, you can register for that one as well. It's in a few weeks. Rain gardens are shallow depressions in the landscape, like a bowl-shaped garden, like in the picture. They capture stormwater runoff, and they have many benefits like pollution reduction. They can filter the stormwater before it gets into our aquifers. They replenish the aquifer, so they let the water seep into the ground. Wildlife habitat, they are planted with native plants, as we talked about. This picture was the one at Clark Botanic Garden. This is like right after we planted it. And this one receives water from the slope in the pavement over here, as well as from the roof. Another great way to reduce stormwater runoff is to use pervious and permeable surfaces. So like things like pervious concrete and pervious asphalt, which are really cool. You could see the water just flows right through them. They look like traditional asphalt and concrete, but the fine particles are left out so that there's space for the water to fall through. And then there's pavers, that interlocking pavers, so they're a little fancier. They have space in between that's filled with grass or stones, allowing the rain to pass through. So you may probably be aware of these already because you signed up for this workshop, but we have 2 other home sustainability workshops this month, the native plant gardening one. So if you want to go, I know I talked somewhat about native plants, but if you want to take an even deeper dive into native plants and learn more about ones you can choose for your yard, that's a great one to take. And then if you want to know about how to create a rain garden and more about those, that one's on March 29th. They are free, open to all, even non-residents, and register where the same place you registered for this one. As I said, we are having our rain barrel and composter sales for 2022 right now. They are $50 each, one each per household, town residents only. You must pre-order these online. We're currently in a pre-order for March 1st to March 21st. The items are being sold on a first come, first served basis. We have a limited funding for the program, so not everyone that does the pre-order, it's possible that you won't be able to receive the items. We're in the very beginning of it though, so if you do it now, you should be able to receive one. But we just had so many orders last year. I just have to preface it by saying that we may not have enough for everyone throughout the whole season. You can pre-order by going to that same website, northhempsteadny.gov/sustainability. And these are all the resources. I will leave this up throughout the question so that anyone can jot these down or take a photo of it with their phones. The sustainability page has the resources that I was telling you about. This is the iNaturalist page over here with all of my observations of pollinators and other wildlife at the parks. National Wildlife Federation's Native Plant Finder is a great resource. Zoysia Society has great resources about pollinator conservation. And also about community science projects. So if you want to get involved in helping researchers, it's a great resource. The Long Island Native Plant Initiative website is great. It has a lot of good info about native plants, and also they usually have native plant sales in the spring and the fall, so I keep checking back with them. The Rewild Initiative, they are having a native plant sale, so if you're interested in purchasing those, if you're already a member, it will start on March 21st, and for the general public, it starts on March 28th. This is their website to go on and get more details once they become available. And then also the National Audubon Society in Oyster Bay, they have a plant sale in spring. At least it says on their website that they will, but there's not much detail yet, but it says April. So I would keep checking there if you would like to purchase native plants. Let me just quickly say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. I really hope you learned a lot and got some good tips and inspiration now that spring is approaching for your yard and how you can manage it more sustainably. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for everything, your great information. And now I will answer, and Bonnie will answer any more questions anyone has. And I'll put this back on the screen so anyone can see it while we're going through the questions. Okay, so let's look. A lot of thank yous. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. All right. So someone says they have a huge mosquito problem in their backyard. Will the rain barrel contribute to the problem? It will not, because it has a screen on it. So mosquitoes should not be able to get in. If you are really worried about that, you can put those mosquito dunks that I mentioned into your rain barrel, and that will definitely prevent them from, I could say, procreating in the rain barrel, laying their eggs in there. What circumference should the mulch be around the base of the tree? I guess it really depends on how big the tree is when you're planting it. because you want it to cover the root system for when you're planting it, but I'm not sure. Bonnie, do you have any suggestions about that?
Well, for a tree that's already there, and if you have roots that are above the ground, you don't want to cover that. Like old roots that are above the ground, you don't want to cover at all. For a newly planted tree, you just need to plant, there's not like an inch or a foot or distance. You just don't want it to be against the base of the tree so that it rots that base. So you want to pull it away from the base.
Thanks, Bonnie. Someone asked, how long does the moss phlox bloom last? In my experience, the past couple of years, it usually started around the beginning of April and then would last into May. So at least a month, a few weeks. It was actually quite long. I was very, very happy. I was, ooh, it's still blooming. They're so pretty. If you plant them in mass like that, I see some people have them in their yards. They only have like 2 plants, so you don't even like notice them as much. But if you plant them in mass, like I have it in front of my yard, I actually got people coming up to my house being like, what is this plant? It's so beautiful. So definitely makes a nice show in the spring. Is it safe to plant milkweeds and laurels in the yard, as I heard they are toxic? As long as you don't eat them, you'll be fine. If you get the sap on you from the milkweed, just don't touch your eyes. Make sure you wash your hands. Make sure kids know not to do that as well. But yeah, they're fine in your yard as long as you're not eating them. Is there a preferred place or company to buy seeds for a butterfly garden? Unfortunately, as a town employee, I cannot recommend that. So, but you could possibly reach out to the Long Island Native Plant Initiative, and they might have some suggestions for you. They might even be able to sell you some seed. They actually have their own seeds that they grow at their location at the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brentwood. Someone said they're ready to start using native plants. I'm very happy to hear that. And there's someone else said they can't wait to get out in the garden. I'm happy, me too, believe me. Lots of thank yous. Great, I appreciate it. Let's see if there's anything here. Love to replace my front lawn with plants, but it faces north. What would you suggest I do or use? Really, there's a native plant for everything. I mean, I have a very sunny front yard, so I use a lot of prairie plants that can take a lot of sun. But if your yard is shady, there's plenty of native plants that you can plant that can handle full shade or partial shade. Off the top of my,
I have a lot of Columbine and phlox, and I have a north-facing front yard in my front. They do well.
Yeah, there's so many. For some reason, I just can't think of any. But yeah, Columbine is a good one. I have spice bush, which is it's kind of a bigger shrub, but it's the host plant for the spice bush swallowtail butterfly, and they have really amazingly beautiful caterpillars. So if you're interested in getting them in your yard, I suggest you plant them, but they can tolerate a lot of shade. There's a lot of ferns you could plant, which are also beautiful.
Even the carrots.
Yeah, sedges too. If you look on the town's website, go to the sustainability page and go to the page about native plants, there's a whole list of plants separated by sun, shade, and when they bloom, and you can find a whole list of things, and you can click on the links and look at the pictures and get some information about shade plants or sun plants or part shade plants or whatever would be best for your yard. There's more things in the chat. Someone said that they did quite a bit of native plants last year and it worked very well, and they highly recommend it, which is fantastic. Thank you. Sisters of St. Joseph, I'm not exactly sure. I know it's in Brentwood, but off the top of my head, I don't know the location. If you go to the Long Island Native Plant Initiative's website, I'm sure they have a map or the address that you could look at. Thank you for the lawn care tips along with native plants. My husband wants a bit of a lawn with native plants, so this is very helpful. Yep, I replaced my whole front lawn with native plants, but I do still have some lawn in the backyard with some other native plants gardens surrounding it. So there's room for both. We're just trying to increase, at least have a little bit of habitat in our yards as well. I think that's it. So again, thank you so much. If you have any further questions, I can put my email in the chat. And again, this is being recorded, so you can always watch it again and, you know, learn something that maybe you missed the first time, or spread it around and have others watch it as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Happy gardening, and hopefully happy spring soon.
Thank you.